Welcome to the AUA Educator Development Program module. This specific module is your guide to conflict of interest disclosures. My name is Jay Rahman. I am professor of urology at Penn State Health and chair of the AUA's Office of Education. And in this module, it's my pleasure to co-host along with Dr. Jody Antonelli, who's associate professor of urology at the Duke University Medical Center and our chair of the AUA Conflict of Interest Review Work Group. So first of all, thank you for volunteering to be an educator for an AUA activity. And we really hope to show you in this module why the conflict of interest disclosure process is so important. Now, we realize for our international volunteers that this system and this process that we're talking about may not be a familiar one for you. And if you have any questions regarding any of the material we're covering today, please feel free to reach out to the AUA staff or the Office of Education for any additional direction. So why are financial disclosures so important for the AUA? Well, the AUA is accredited by the ACCME, which stands for the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education. And as an educated provider, the AUA must adhere to the ACCME's standards for integrity and independence in continuing education. And this was formerly known as the Standards for Commercial Support. Now, a key requirement of these standards is to identify, mitigate, and disclose all financial relationships with commercial entities. And the AUA can only give accredited education by adhering to these standards. So throughout this program, you're going to hear Dr. Antonelli and I talk about conflict of interest, or COI. And in accredited education, a conflict of interest occurs when an individual has a relationship with a company or an organization that may affect or may be perceived to affect one's judgment or decision-making. And to go into this in greater detail, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Antonelli, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about specific details about the relationships that must be disclosed, how these relationships are reviewed, and then the steps that must be taken to mitigate any potential conflicts of interest.
Thank you so much, Jay. So let me begin with what must be disclosed to the AUA. So because the AUA uses an organization-wide disclosure system for all volunteers, you must disclose all financial and intellectual relationships that you've held within the previous 24 months. And this includes commercial interests, healthcare publications, and associations with other medical entities. You don't need to disclose your hospital or practice employment status. And for the purpose of continuing education, we'll only review your relationships with commercial interests. However, committee positions and other roles within the AUA may review your relationships with healthcare publications and medical associations. And it's also important to note that the disclosure look-back period just was recently extended from 12 months to 24 months. So please ensure that your current disclosures reflect the last 24 months. So what is a commercial interest? A commercial interest is a company whose primary business is producing, marketing, selling, or reselling or distributing healthcare products used by or on patients. The examples listed here are just some of the common types of commercial interests. A sample list of both commercial interests and non-commercial interests is available in the handouts provided. So I think one of the most important questions is what relationships actually must be disclosed. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit of detail. The first is any relationship with health publishing. So this includes service on an editorial board, paid authorship or contributorship, service as a paid reviewer, and any publishing royalty arrangements that you may have. Next would be if you're a consultant or advisor, so such as service on a research, product development, marketing, or advisory board, or quality assurance safety monitoring board related to any healthcare product or service. Being a meeting participant or lecturer, such as one where you'd receive an honoraria, reimbursements of any kind of payments received as a faculty member or industry-sponsored lecturer. Participation in a scientific study or trial as a principal investigator, as well as grant support for scientific studies or trials. And then leadership positions such as board, officer, trustee, editor, or other leadership positions relating to healthcare. This doesn't include positions with a commercial interest in which you have direct ownership or receive salary or wages. We'll discuss those roles next. So these last four relationship types include those that I think are, faculty often find the most confusing without reviewing them in kind of full detail. So I'm going to go through those. Next would be investment interest. So this includes personal or family ownership of stock or stock options issued by a publicly traded company. Intellectual property interest. This includes ownership of any intellectual property, such as a patent for a healthcare product or service, or receipt of royalties for any intellectual property interest. Being an owner in a healthcare related company. This includes ownership of stock, stock options, or other ownership interests in any private entity. If ownership is selected, you're going to be asked to respond to follow-up questions that will help determine if this company meets the ACCME definition of a commercial interest. And then employee, this includes wages or salaries received from a commercial interest. Employment in a urology practice or in the U.S. military does not need to be disclosed.
So Jody, one question maybe on the issue of ownership. So what if I own stock in a private company that's researching and developing a new drug for prostate cancer, but the product is still in the development phase? Do I still need to disclose that?
Yes, you should disclose and indicate that you're an owner of this company. Once you select the relationship type, you'll be asked if the company has begun the regulatory approval process yet. If an application has not been submitted to the FDA or other government regulatory authority outside of the United States, then your disclosure report record will indicate that you are an owner. But that the company only had products in a preclinical phase. If an applicant if an application has been submitted for regulatory approval, then we'll display this relationship as owner, which leads us to the next slide. So are there any relationships that may impact my ability to participate in an accredited activity? And the answer to that is yes. According to the ACCME, owners and employees of commercial interests are considered to have unresolvable financial relationships and must be excluded as planners, reviewers, or faculty, with three very important exceptions. So if you currently have a relationship with a commercial interest that meets the definition of owner or employee, please reach out to the AUA staff to discuss that relationship specifically before accepting any invitation to participate in accredited activities. The ACCME requires that all individuals in control of content of an accredited activity complete a disclosure, even if you have nothing to disclose. So you'll simply select and confirm that you have no disclosures. So we'll now watch a brief video walking us through completing the conflict of interest disclosure form online.
To begin the process of completing or updating your COI disclosure record, open an internet browser window and navigate to auanet.org/COI. This will bring you to the My AUA login page, where you can log in using your 8-digit AUA ID number and single sign-on password. If you are a new user or currently have no disclosures listed, you will have the choice to add a new disclosure or declare that you have nothing to disclose. If you have no financial or intellectual relationships for the past 24 months with commercial interests, healthcare publications, or other medical associations, you can click the I have nothing to disclose button and your disclosure process is complete for this period. To add a new disclosure, click on the Add New Disclosure button. Begin creating the disclosure record by clicking the radio button for self or family to choose whether the relationship applies to you or a family member, then add the name of the company or organization with whom you have a relationship. You may then select the type of company or organization. Please choose the option that most accurately describes the entity. If you choose Other, please be sure to enter a description. Then choose Yes or No, depending on whether the relationship is financial or not. To learn the definition of financial relationship, click on the circle I icon. Financial relationships are those relationships in which individuals benefit by receiving compensation or other remuneration. Next, you will select the type of relationship you have with the named entity. Again, there are blue circle information icons next to each relationship type that provides definitions so that you can be sure to choose the type that accurately characterizes the relationship. The full descriptions of relationship types is included in the appendix section of the online COI disclosure program instructions. This is a critical step in the disclosure process, so it is especially important to be as accurate as possible here. Please note that the owner relationship type requires additional information. If you choose owner as the relationship, please note that this refers to the ownership of stocks, stock options, or other ownership interest in a private healthcare entity versus an investment interest, which refers to the ownership of stocks or stock options in a publicly traded company. If you select owner, you will be required to answer the following question. Does this entity, 1, currently produce, market, sell, resell, or distribute healthcare products used by or on patients? Or 2, has it begun the governmental regulatory approval process for any of its products? For example, submitted an application for investigational new drug or pre-market approval? Please answer yes or no. Now select the urologic specialty for the relationship. Remember that you can clarify this section and any others by adding information in the description field. The description field provides the opportunity to briefly describe the nature of the relationship. This is optional, but we encourage you to add as much descriptive information as you can. It helps us review your disclosures and determine if the relationship is relevant to the activity in which you're participating. You should then provide the start date, the date the relationship began, and the end date, if the relationship has come to an end. If the relationship is currently ongoing, please check the Current box. Then click Add Disclosure to return to the previous page. You may continue to add additional disclosure records. Once all are complete, please click on the Confirm My Record button to submit your disclosures. If you're a returning user with existing disclosure records, these will be displayed to you in a table that lists the specific information for each disclosure. You can click on the plus sign to view the description text you previously provided. Please carefully review your existing disclosures. If edits are needed to an existing record, please click on the pencil icon to make necessary updates. You can also add any new disclosure records. When you add a new disclosure record, it will appear in the table in red. You can edit or delete the disclosure if it is in the red or draft status. Please note that once you click Confirm My Record, the disclosure cannot be deleted, only edited. Once you have completed your review, and if necessary, edits and/or additions, you must click on the Confirm My Records button even if you have made no changes. Once your record is fully updated and/or confirmed, you'll receive a thank you message, and the confirmation date of your COI disclosure will be updated to today's date.
So when do you disclose? The answer to this is pretty much immediately. Disclosures are to be completed immediately upon accepting an invitation. Due to the steps that the AUA takes after you submit your disclosures, which we'll cover next, and out of respect for your time, as ownership or employment status with a commercial interest may result in an unresolvable financial relationship, the sooner we clearly know your relationships, the better. So please do disclose all relationships immediately upon accepting an invitation. So after your disclosure is complete, the AUA COI review work group reviews your disclosures to identify relevant financial relationships with commercial interests, and then implements a mechanism to mitigate any conflicts of interest. To help the COI review work group identify relevant financial relationships with commercial interests, the AUA has updated the disclosure site to now collect the type of company, for example, pharmaceutical or device company, and the topic area for each relationship. If this information is not complete on any of your disclosures, we'll ask that you please edit the disclosure to include the additional information. Failure to complete your disclosure in a timely manner will result in, unfortunately, your removal from the activity. The AUA Office of Education, working with the COI review work group, will select an appropriate mechanism from the list shown here to mitigate any potential bias. A primary method for mitigating conflicts of interest is peer review. If your presentation is selected for peer review, please submit it by the deadline provided by the AUA staff to allow the conflict of interest work group volunteers adequate time to complete the review and then work with you to make any necessary changes. Please know that the COI review work group is only checking for potential bias and to confirm that content is free of any promotion, such as any trade names or any logos. They are not editing the content of your presentation. So what is the intent of the disclosure to the learner? It's basically to disclose to the learner any financial relationships that faculty may have, which could bias the content. And then this allows the learner to decide whether or not they want to participate in the activity. So in summary, the key points here to take home are basically, number one, review and update your AUA COI disclosures immediately upon accepting an invitation to participate in accredited activity. This allows the AUA to quickly identify any relationships that may prevent you from participating in the activity before you spend any time planning or developing content. It also allows the AUA time to identify any conflicts of interest and implement an appropriate mechanism to mitigate those conflicts. If you don't complete your disclosure in a timely manner, unfortunately, you'll be removed from the activity. And if peer review is selected as the mitigation process, please comply with the deadline provided. It may seem early, but please know that these deadlines are determined by several factors, including volume of reviews and deadlines prior to the meeting. We appreciate your adherence to these guidelines, and we really thank you for your time and volunteering for this important activity. I'll turn it back over to Jay to conclude the activity.
Thanks, Jody, so much for that really outstanding summary. In conclusion, the COI review process from the AUA really plays an important role in ensuring all of our accredited education is developed free of commercial bias. And as planners, reviewers, and faculty, you are all collectively critical to the success of our activities. As a reminder, the disclosures really should be completed immediately upon accepting an invitation to optimally allow the COI review group time to review the activity, complete their review, and obviously any mitigation steps that may be necessary. And please remember that our COI reviewers are volunteers. So if your content is selected for review, please be respectful of their time by submitting your content by the due date. Finally, really a huge thank you on behalf of myself, as well as the Office of Education, for your time. We genuinely do appreciate volunteers like you. And if you have any questions at all, please contact us at education@auanet.org.